And by the way, please, you have no excuse to miss a question like this because it's at home. There's no time limit, open book. Okay. Just open the book. I mean, I see some stuff that's missed. It makes me sad because that means you didn't put the effort. It doesn't matter how smart or dumb you are. If you don't put the effort, you're not gonna get it. And even if you don't have 200 IQ, if you put the effort, you're gonna get those kinds of questions. Dividend growth models based on the assumption that discount rate is greater than the growth rate. That's true because otherwise the formula doesn't work. You need R greater than G. Preferred stock is treated as debt for tax purposes. Right or wrong? We just talked about this. False. It's treated as common stock, and any expenses made on it are not tax deductible. If it's debt, it is. The security represents the residual ownership of a firm and has no priority in bankruptcy. It's called a convertible bond. True or false? Residual means whatever that remains. You probably don't know what a convertible bond is. We talked about it a little bit in chapter 6. It's a type of bond where the holder of the bond has the option to convert it into common stock. Given that, is this a true statement or false statement? Take a hack at it. You don't have to be right. This is a place where being wrong is free.
False.
Why? Come on, man. You're not new here. When you make a statement in any knowledge environment, whether or not that statement is correct in and of itself has no knowledge value. That is information. The fact that this statement is false is information. Knowing why it's false, it's knowledge. Okay? Knowledge doesn't have to be deep. We're not talking about meaning of life here. Simple because what's described over there is common stock. That's why it's false. And convertible bonds have nothing to do with residual ownership, and they have a priority in bankruptcy. Because until they are converted, they are bonds. So they have priority over common stock. That's the minimum reason why it should be false. Again, in the quiz, you don't have to explain it. But if you understand why things are false, it's a lot easier to recognize that they are false. Way back when, I actually did a study and I published this in one of the top education journals. I did some exams that were called confidence-based exams. So this is a true-false question, right? Not only you're going to tell me whether it's true or false, but you also have to tell me your level of confidence. Full, fair, some, and none. And those keywords have meanings. Full means if you're correct, I give you 125% of the point value. So 4 point becomes 5. But if you're false, you're going to get negative 2, negative 50%. Fair means 100% versus negative 25. Some means 75 versus 0. None means I give you 35% regardless of whether you were right or wrong. In addition to a lot of pedagogical reasons why I did that, which also killed my teaching evaluations. Thankfully, I was already tenured when I started that. I'm not that dumb. But it also had gave me a means to understand a phenomenon in true-false questions called acquiescence bias. When students are given true-false questions, generically, regardless of the topic, when the correct answer is true, they tend to get it 75 to 80% of the time. When the correct answer is false, the success rate goes down to, depending upon the topic, anywhere from 50 to 65%. So there tend to be a gap between the two, 15 to 20%. That's called acquiescence bias. And one of the arguments is, at least in American society, we are socially nice people, at least in crowded interactions. And we tend to kill each other, but in a crowded setting, unless we have a good reason otherwise, we'd like to say yes then no. When somebody asks you, can you do me a favor? More often than not, independent of how well they know you, the answer is yes. In Russia, by the way, it's the other way around. The default answer for Russians is niet. Unless they have a good reason otherwise, they don't say yes. But this is kind of very common phenomenon. Then another explanation has to do with psychology. It's called cognitive fatigue syndrome. Okay? Hmm? No, that has nothing to do with that. Cognitive fatigue syndrome is, in order to recognize whether a statement is true or not, if it's true, you just know it's true. You've seen a definition, you can make an argument for it. In order to say that a statement is false, typically you have to come up with a reason why it is false. People with higher cognitive skills or more cognitive energy, they go through more reasons why it could be false. When they can't find one, they say, okay, I can't find a reason, hence it must be false. People who are fatigued cognitively, low energy, they ask one or two questions at most. Well, I thought about it, I can't come up with it, it must be false. The trouble is you can't distinguish between the two factors using a standard true-false exam. And we randomly ask the same question the traditional way and the extra crispy way, the confidence-based. So students got half the questions regular, half the questions extra crispy. And it turns out when the students are fully confident of their answer, the difference between performance in true versus performance in false is about 5 points. When they're not fully confident, it's about 30 points. So difference in the differences is a measure of acquiescence bias. So the more you know, the less you are fooled by that sort of stuff. That even applies even with multiple choice questions. I did another study that I haven't published yet. Hopefully this summer I'm going to publish that. It's a multiple choice question. I started with a 5 choice question. I got rid of two weakest distractors. They're typically space fillers. There is a correct answer, a stronger distractor and a weaker distractor. Students randomly got either the 2 choice versus 3 choice question and also randomly regular or extra crispy. When students overall performance on 2 choice questions are a lot better compared to 3 choice, even after correcting for random chance. Because if you flip a coin, you're going to get it 50% of the time. So if you get an 80, correction is about what? Should be about 10 points, 70. But if it's three choice random guess gets you the correct answer only one third of the time. Even after correcting for that, students did worse on three choice questions compared to two choice. And the idea is if they're not the third choice, even though it's kind of weaker alternative, it confuses them when they're not confident of their answer, when they don't have the knowledge. Partial knowledge is very dangerous. And again, when you looked at the confidence-based questions, when they were fully sure of their answer, corrected for random guessing, performance was almost identical in two choice versus three choice. When they were less than sure, I didn't even take into account of they had no confidence. The gap was about 30 points. So when you know something partially, that's a very dangerous thing because it confuses you. Uh, now this is called an ECN. Again, if you read it, you'll know. I don't go over that sort of stuff in the class because you don't pay me to read what you can read in the book. That is true.